Hey, everybody, welcome to this episode of the podcast. I am so thrilled that you're here. Today's episode, I want to talk about you as the expert. I just had an amazing conversation with someone who is a service provider doing one-on-one work as an agency owner doing done for you services. This applies to coaches and freelancers and consultants and anyone else who is serving clients one-on-one in any capacity. It was a great conversation. I want to share it with you as I'm sort of processing the rest of what we had talked about. And basically, here's the deal is that if you are growing a one-on-one based business, right? So you're doing done for you services for your customers, you're meeting with them one-on-one, whatever you're selling is based on your time. The challenge that you have is that you don't own your time, right? You don't have the ability to grow and expand a one-on-one business beyond your time because it's all based on how much time you're putting in with each and every individual customer. And when I talk about the infinite scale method and I talk about how to help somebody become a scalable expert, what we're really talking about is how do you build assets that allow you to use the expertise that you've mastered, use it in a way that allows you to deliver in a completely different way than just showing up and doing ad hoc services. Often when you are in that, you're kind of trying to grow a business, you get overwhelmed. There's a lot going on. Your customers want you, you need to show up. And then every single time you have a conversation with them, you're sort of reinventing the wheel, right? So if you are in this kind of business model, you know what I'm talking about. You get to a place where you're like, oh, wait a minute, like I'm overwhelmed. Is there nothing else that I can do to kind of get on top of that? And oh, by the way, I would love to build something else, but I don't have any time because all my time is devoted to my customers. So you're really good at what you do. Therefore, you get a lot of people who are interested in what you do, but every new customer adds a different level of complexity and starts to continually overwhelm your time, which is sort of that kind of the cycle that you end up in. I was talking to a service provider and she's just like, so I don't understand how I would you know come up with a framework, an authority strategy that would allow me to help my customers. Like, would I just turn it into a course? Would I just turn it into something that I would just have them do? I don't understand how that translates into a done for you service. Like, how would I help them? And then if I decide that I want to do it differently than a done for you service, like, how do I show up? How do I build something that allows me to do what I do in a bigger, scalable way? Great question, right? Obviously, a question that a lot of people are asking is how do I get to that point? So, one of the strategies that I help people do is to come up with your own authority framework. So, what does that look like? What does that mean? I'll walk you through just a little bit of how I help people unpack that when they work with me, primarily in our different offers that we have. The very first question that I ask is like, what are you an expert in, right? You've mastered your expertise. You have gotten to this point because you're really good at what you do. You've learned it, you know how to apply it, you know how to do it. That's why people are hiring you, is because you can do the work. You can do all of the things that you need in order to help people become successful. So what does that look like? Like, what is your expertise? And then the second thing I'll say about that is if you don't know what your expertise is, or you don't kind of know how you help people, maybe you intuitively do it. Maybe every single time you have a customer, it's just slightly different, or it's totally different based on what they want. And you're, showing up and just helping them with whatever they're asking for because you're really good at whatever it is that they're asking for, right? But it's totally random, totally different every single time we have a new client. So how can you start to think about what you do in a step-by-step roadmap, or a step-by-step framework is what we call it, right? So how do you look at all your customers that you have or that you want to have and think about, okay, how would I take them to go from the problem that they have to the result that they're looking for? What is my step-by-step path? And I will tell you, every industry has a standard in terms of like the path that helps somebody go from point A to point B. If you don't know what yours is, like your unique version of it, then go out and do a search. Like if you're a social media expert, what is the social media framework? Like what are the steps that it takes to be a really good social media expert? If you do Facebook ads, like what's the approach for that? If you're an instructional designer, like where I was in my world, is that there is a standard framework that we all follow in the industry. And then what happens is as you gain expertise, you have your unique way that you look at it. You have different nuances in terms of how you help people. When you know that there needs to be this extra little thing that is part of the process because that's where your expertise comes in. And so if you don't know what yours is yet, come up with what the standards are and then start to kind of push against it. Like, oh, this is what I think, or this is what I don't think, or whatever. And then go and look at how you're helping your customers. Are there things that you're doing with every single one of your customers, even if you're not kind of saying that that's what you're doing each and every time? So start to do a little bit of work around that to figure out what are the steps that you are taking the majority of your customers through and really start to define that. Then from there, once you start doing that, you're like, oh, this is step one. I do step one with all of my customers. For this example, she does a customer avatar assessment, or like, who's your customer? What's their problem? All that kind of standard that you see in most marketing facing frameworks is you have to start with like, who is it that you're serving? What is it? What is the problem that you are solving? And what is the result? Really looking at dialing that messaging in so you know who you're serving and all the things. She's like, that's what I do first. I'm like, great. So how do you do that? Well, she's got a methodology that she uses for that particular step. Awesome. Then lead with that. Say, this is the very first step that we do. Every single time I work with a client, we start with this step. That is your step one of your framework. Then continue to keep doing that until you have sort of exhausted all of the steps that you go through with the majority of your customers. And I recommend writing that in boxes, like on a linear path, so you can start seeing like, oh, we do this and then we do this and then we do this. Right? Like there's a method to the madness of how you work with your customers. And then what starts to happen is you can start to lead the conversation with your customers. I always equate it to like the difference of like, if you show up for a meeting, do you show up with an agenda and you're like, here's what we're covering today, here's our objective, here's where we're going? Or do you show up with your customers and you go, hey, all right, what do you want to talk about today? What's on your mind? Right? Two totally different approaches. One puts you in the driver's seat. The other one puts you in a support role. And so I would argue that if you want to own your authority, if you want to be known as the expert in your niche, if you want to attract people who are confident and very clear on how you help them go from where they are today to where they want to be, that you can do that by just helping them see the bigger picture of how they would get to the results that they're looking for by following your framework. And so we really work on building out that authority framework. And then once you have those steps sort of clear, like you're going to keep testing them there, maybe you're going to flip some around or some are not named the right thing or whatever, like you'll play with it a little bit. But once you sort of have that, then you can start serving your current customers and putting them on the path. And if you can start getting them on the path and get a little bit more consistent on how you show up step after step after step with your customers before you automate anything, before you create anything that's a scalable asset, it allows you to start getting comfortable owning your expertise, owning your authority. Once you do that, then you can start putting pieces in place that will help you actually optimize and then eventually really start to get control of the time that you're taking in each one of those steps with your customers. So another example is, so instead of thinking about, well, I have to create all of this stuff in that same process that I was talking to this person about, she's like, I said, well, what do you have them do? Well, we walk through, an activity and an exercise on this, this, and this, and this. And then we work through all the different parts and pieces. She's like, well, I guess I can train somebody, on my team to be able to do that, so I don't have to do it. And I said, well, what about creating a mini training for that customer that gives them everything that they need, gives them some structure to how they need to think about who their ideal customer is, how they need to start thinking about that. And then when they're ready, when they have their thoughts together, then they're able to schedule a call with you, or they're able to ask you questions in a Slack channel or in Voxer or via email or however you want to do it, right? High tech or low tech. They're able to jump on a call or they're able to get feedback, and then you can continue moving forward. So you know when it makes sense to jump on the phone with them versus like, hey, how's it going? Just wanted to jump on and see what's going because I know that you love to be with me one on one. Totally different opportunity in terms of how to control, how to leverage, and how to maximize your effort working with your one-on-one clients. And then from there, maybe you have a tool or a template or a worksheet you want them to use. Then you start to just slowly go through that process and dial in each of the different steps. And then before you know it, you are in a position where you are able to come in and provide a ton of value without wasting all of your time or, reinventing the wheel every single time. And then you start moving into done with you services, maybe group coaching, maybe creating some sort of on demand option for your customers who either want that option or who aren't quite ready for your done for you agency. And now all of a sudden you have a holistic set of offers that are all tied back to your proprietary framework, your authority framework. So instead of offers that are all over the place based on like random things that you are, kind of random ideas, it's all based on your framework and how you can help your customers through the different various things that they need to do in order to be successful and able to go from point A to point B. So hopefully this serves you and gives you just some tactical tips to start thinking about. Because my friend, here's what happens is very rarely do you have the mindset that allows you to go directly from a done for you agency into completely automated scalable assets. It is a completely different game. And you're going to have to go through some iterations of how do you start to serve your customers at the highest level and also control and leverage your time so that you can grow. So you can go from 10 customers to 100 customers to 1,000 customers and be able to grow something that increases your impact, your income, and your freedom. So if this episode was interesting for you, if you're like, oh, I really like this, I want to learn more, I want to dive into how I can do this in my business, give me a shout in the show notes or wherever you are listening or watching this episode. There should be something on the page that helps you get a hold of us, either schedule a call or jump into one of our awesome free resources that we have. We even have a checklist that kind of just lets you check off all of the things that I talked about today. Go ahead and engage with us. We would love to help you out with this. So in the meantime, I hope that this helps you go from being an overwhelmed expert to becoming more of a scalable expert. So until we meet again, have a great week.